It's not my computer. We just can't hear it.
They can't hear it. I'll let you know. Just watch my body, guys.
The opportunity to explain all of that when it's the state's turn to ask more open-ended questions.
Yeah.
Mr. Merchant.
Thank you, Judge.
The judge intervening, but the combative exchange continued. Merchant accuses the Fulton County DA of engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a special prosecutor she hired to help with the election interference case against Trump. Willis denies there was a conflict of interest. Meanwhile, former President Trump reacted today after learning he would have to stand trial on criminal charges in New York next month.
Nobody's ever seen anything like it in this country. It's a disgrace.
In this case, Trump is accused of falsifying business records to conceal hush money payments. Authorities in Kansas City are releasing more information about yesterday's shooting at a Super Bowl rally that injured more than 20 people and killed one person. Here's KCUR Sam Zeff.
Kansas City Police Chief Stacey Graves says it was an argument that led to the shootout near the city's Union Station. Graves says 2 of the 3 suspects are juveniles and several guns were recovered. Graves also says that overnight police identified another victim and that people from 8 to 47 sustained injuries.
At least half of our victims are under the age of 16.
The dead woman was identified as Lisa Lopez Galvin, who was described as a pillar of the Latino community in Kansas City. A local county legislator and friend of the family says at least 3 of her relatives were also shot, including a young niece and nephew. For NPR News, I'm Sam Zeff in Kansas City.
Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon say they're preparing for war. Here's NPR's Daniel Estrin.
Since the beginning of the Israel-Hamas war, there's been low-grade warfare between the Iranian-backed Hezbollah militant group in Lebanon and Israel. That intensified Wednesday. Rockets from Lebanon killed an Israeli soldier at a base and landed deep inside northern Israel in the city of Tzfat. Israel responded with strikes on Hezbollah sites. The strikes reached deep into the southern Lebanese city of Nabatiyeh. Lebanese state media said 7 members of a family were killed when their building was hit. Israel on Thursday launched further strikes targeting Hezbollah. A Hezbollah official said the group is prepared for the possibility of expanding the war. Israel's military chief of staff said the same. There are French and U.S. diplomatic efforts to avert an Israel-Lebanon war. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
It's NPR News.
For Columbia Radio News, I'm Dominic Hall-Thomas. Former President Donald Trump was back in court this morning as New York City Supreme Court Judge Juan Merchan set out the details for Trump's latest court battle. The prosecution says payments totaling $130,000 made to his lawyer, Michael Cohen, were actually a payment to former porn star Stormy Daniels to keep her from leaking information to the press about the nature of their alleged affair in 2006. The prosecution argues this is falsifying business records, a crime in New York. The case is the latest in a series of legal troubles for Trump. He was trying to get the case dismissed because he believes it is politically motivated. Judge Merchan set a trial date for March 25th, despite the objections from Trump's legal team. Earlier this morning, FBI agents searched the homes and offices of two senior FDNY chiefs in Brooklyn. Authorities are investigating whether a former firefighter directed building developers to two chiefs in order to get quicker approval in exchange for payments totaling $200,000. The FDNY has been cooperating with the investigation since it began last summer. Earlier today, the chiefs, Brian Cordasco and Anthony Saccavino, although not accused of wrongdoing, were placed on modified duty as a precaution during the ongoing investigation. This morning, New York City's council reviewed a bill aimed at reducing pollution caused by cruise ships docked in Brooklyn. The Our Air, Our Water bill, which was introduced by council member Alexis Avelis, would require ships to use the city's electrical grid rather than running their engines to power the ships whilst docked. The bill also aims to reduce congestion, noise pollution, and air pollution in the area surrounding the cruise terminal. A cruise ship using its engine for power produces nearly 5 times as much air pollution as one powered by the city's electrical grid, according to the EPA. Dominic Hall-Thomas, Columbia Radio News.
Breaking news. After pauses for COVID and Hollywood strikes, movie and TV production has resumed on the streets of the city. In the weeks since the strike ended, the number of permits issued by the city for projects being filmed on public property has quickly rebounded. But fire department chiefs in New York City are finding themselves in deep water. New York investigators working with federal authorities also searched the chief's offices at the department's headquarters as part of an inquiry into whether they inappropriately accepted payments. You're listening to Uptown Radio. I'm Samuel Eli Shepard.
And I'm Dean Condoleo.
Later tonight, a University of Iowa senior is set to break the women's scoring record at the National Collegiate Basketball Tournament. Caitlin Clark of the Iowa Hawkeyes says she's excited and not anxious as she approaches the big game. She's on track for a slam dunk with an average of 32 points per game this season.
An extraordinary move, Venezuela expels UN Human Rights Agency. The agency has 72 hours to leave the country, marking a drastic hardening of conditions inside the South American nation.
Greece was expected to legalize same-sex marriage and equal parental rights for same-sex couples on Thursday, as lawmakers considered a bill that has divided Greek society and drawn vehement opposition from the country's powerful Orthodox Church. By 2025, California public high schools must teach ethnic studies. It impacts over 1,000 schools. Other states like Oregon, Vermont, and Minnesota plan to follow suit in the next few years.
Mayor Adams is suing social media giants TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. The city alleges that they're exploiting young users' mental health and cost the city over $100 million in treatment each year. Attorney Heather Kukalo teaches at New York Law School, and I wanted to understand the legal strategy behind this lawsuit.
After pauses for COVID and Hollywood strikes, movie and TV production has resumed on the streets of the city. In the weeks since the strikes ended, the number of permits issued by the city for projects being filmed on public property has quickly rebounded.
But fire department chiefs in New York City are finding themselves in deep waters. New York investigators working with federal authorities also searched the chief's offices at the department's headquarters as part of an inquiry into whether they inappropriately accepted payments.
Greece is set to be the first Orthodox country to allow same-sex marriage. The country's parliament is expected to also extend equal parental rights to same-sex couples, including clearing the way for adopting children.
Mayor Adams is suing social media giants TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. The city alleges that they're exploiting young users' mental health and cost the city over $100 million in treatment each year. Attorney Heather Kukalo teaches at New York Law School, and I wanted to understand the legal strategy behind this lawsuit.
Children's mental health, in particular, like by promoting addiction. And there's this interesting relationship that they're making towards like other addictions, such as alcohol or gambling or whatnot. And so the lawsuit is really just alleging that companies intentionally design their platforms in order to purposefully manipulate, addict children and teens to social media. And that's done a number of ways. Harmful algorithms, gambling, making the user feel like appreciated or compelled to respond, getting this like positive feedback. The 3 counts in the lawsuit are
negligence, gross negligence, and public nuisance.
What could be done to stop this youth mental health crisis from continuing, rather than just them having to pay for what it has already done?
So first, I just want to make it clear, like, there's been no legislation enacted on a congressional level, right, that has been able to really regulate or monitor social media platform groups in this light. New York, I think, is inching closer. This bill that's been introduced that's moving to stop addictive feeds, exploitation, and Safe Act for kids, they're working towards getting that passed. But we have seen, and most recently, for instance, in Ohio, similar acts being struck down as unconstitutional. And the reasoning, of course, being, First Amendment violations. But what do we do on a broader scale in assisting with mental health and mental health concerns, and particularly of our youth? And as much as I think that these are important steps that at least need to be fettered out and need to be taken in terms of legislation and lawsuits, we have to put the resources into our school systems. New York City public schools have long needed better resources, better support. So we're more focused on solving these problems when they happen, but we ignore some of the root causes that we need to begin to address before we begin to see those symptoms.
How long do you predict this case will take?
Oof. Obviously we're at the very early stages. I definitely think that it's going to take a while to make its way through the courts. There'll be so many motions, counter motions, motions to dismiss, summary judgment, all kinds of back and forth litigation. I think it would be years, potentially. That's, of course, if it withstands some of the earlier attempts to knock it out of the court system.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
New York City is home to more than 300,000 Jews from Russia and Ukraine. Many fled persecution in Europe in the 20th century. Now, in the third year of Russia's war in Ukraine, many Jews are grappling with their connection to their homeland. Irina Humaneuk reports.
When Fanya Vasilevsky was growing up in Soviet Ukraine in the 1970s, she was ineligible to attend university.
For me, it was very difficult. The most I could achieve was to become a registered nurse. I wanted to go to medical school, but the dean of medical school said there will be no Jews, period.
Vasilevsky's religion meant that she could not go to school. In 1974, Vasilevsky was one of thousands of Soviet Jews who immigrated to the United States, fleeing Soviet oppression. In America, she was able to receive degrees in political science and law. She started visiting a synagogue for the first time in her life. Eventually, she settled in Brighton Beach.
I really enjoyed the newfound freedom. I really was almost like drunk, could not stop drinking this air of freedom.
But Vasilevsky recognizes that she also has enduring ties to the former USSR.
Ukraine is a very beautiful country. It's so beautiful, the flowers, the food, people, the colors, everything is beautiful.
And her feelings are also complicated. She says since the war in Ukraine, she and other members of her synagogue have constantly debated and discussed their sense of identity. Before we started recording, she told me, I don't regret leaving the USSR, but I regret that my culture is Russian.
The bitterness is that neither Russians nor Ukrainian ever let us feel that we're Ukrainians or Russian.
Vasilevsky says because of the oppression she faced, she does not identify as Russian or Ukrainian. Today, Vasilevsky considers herself an American Jew. Rebecca Kubrin is the co-director of the Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies in New York. She says it's common for Ukrainian and Russian Jews to reject their European heritage.
One of the greatest quotes I've read is Jews only become Russian once they come to America. Because no one in Russia considers a Jew Russian. But when you're in America and you're speaking Russian, they consider you Russian.
But Kubrin also maintains that Jewish being is inextricably linked to East Europe. And that also means some Jews feel guilt about being associated with a culture that has a history of imperialism.
Because, being Russian is actually being an imperial, right? Since Catherine the Great, Russia is expanding and is imperial. It was the largest country in the 19th century in Europe. Jews spoke Russian, they spoke Ukrainian, they spoke Polish, they speak the languages, they were trading with everyone. So it's, even though they might articulate that they are different, they are part of the landscape, and the landscape is also part of them.
But for some American Jews with Russian or Ukrainian roots, questions about their identity are simpler to come by, despite the ongoing conflict. Joshua Rubin is in his 20s. He's younger than Vasilevsky. He works with his father and grandfather in the Diamond District of Manhattan. He doesn't feel any ties to his Soviet heritage, but he doesn't associate this with intergenerational trauma. He just grew up American.
I kind of view my identity as American because I was born here. But really, I wasn't that connected to my Russian heritage other than during holidays, food. That's about it.
As for Vasilevsky, she's planning to continue talking about her identity at temple at Saturday services. Complicated issues and all. Irina Humenyuk, Uptown Radio News.
Another New York Fashion Week just ended. This year's edition was special because it featured an entirely new way of showing clothes, via hologram. The technology, called Real Live Motion, is part of a wave of new innovations being embraced by fashion designers. Clara Bouters tells us more.
It's Friday night in FIT's Great Hall. The music is blasting, and the lights have just calmed down.
Please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
The mood totally changes. Instead of a model on the runway, a ballet dancer dressed in white steps onto this stage. As she begins to dance, Her movements are projected on a screen next to her. It's a hologram, making the same moves, but wearing a bright green flowing dress that seems lit from the inside.
So the camera was recording the movements of the dancer, Lindsay Miller, and the avatars were moving as she moved. So we were just creating this new fluid runway show.
Claire Tattersall is the founder of Digital Fashion Week. This is Real Life Motion.
But it's really looking at what are the possibilities with fashion, what are the uses of digital fashion, and how we can interact differently with fashion and tell the story.
These kind of changes are transforming the industry, but Tattersall says it doesn't exist without creativity.
Think about being an electrician. Does a screwdriver take away from your skills? No, it just helps you do what you need to do. So software are just tools that help you get where you want to get faster.
But you gotta put in the time to learn these skills. That's why Bianca Ferri Marini has been watching a lot of YouTube.
I've watched so many videos, honestly.
Designers need to rapidly adapt.
Sometimes they don't even speak English and you go like, okay, please, I'm gonna need a translator over here. That's the fun part of being self-taught on YouTube.
Digital fashion has changed the way Marini works. She now calls herself a phygital designer, physical plus digital. She says the process is faster and it's more sustainable since you can make changes on the fly.
With softwares, 3D softwares, you can simulate and cut and sew any garment in very short time, and you can have a preview of how it's going to be.
And Marini says that it's good for customers too. For instance, you could go online and have your own avatar try on clothes, like bathing suits, fancy ones.
You can literally choose anything, any color, any trims and decoration you can put on the avatar, and you can use it on your personal taste. Like soon will be, if not maybe tomorrow, because it's gonna be like it's going like really fast. We could see like people walking around actually wearing filters while they walk in the streets.
And that's all great. But Marini says that there will be some limits to what the digital experience can mean.
Sometimes, honestly, I think it's a little scary because I feel we don't have to lose the concept of reality.
Because we're still wearing clothes on our actual bodies. For now. Clara Bowders for Uptown Radio.
Here at Uptown Radio, we love the sounds of New York City. We sent our reporters across the 5 boroughs to record New Yorkers doing, well, New York things. Here are some of those sounds.
Boris Pinkasov, barber.
It's very artistic. You have to know what you're doing. You need to see the image before you actually make it happen. It's not even a job, it's more of a profession. So it's a trade. Not many people can do it. I learned patience. I learned how to use proper skills to talk to, I guess, customers, people in the street. It broadens your perspective on how many different types of people think and view you as a whole. You develop as a human being on a whole different level and way quicker because you're exposed to so many people. So you see the world quicker, in a sense, more than, I guess, if someone were to, go all the way from 20 to 30 and just figure it out as he goes. You figure it out within the first 2 years.
You're listening to Uptown Radio, Thursdays at 4.
You're listening to Uptown Radio.
There's more to come. Stay with us. Welcome back to Uptown Radio. I'm Samuel Eli Shepard.
And I'm Dean Condoleo. Coming up, A special election narrows the partisan gap in the House of Representatives.
Chinatown might finally get a traditional archway.
And New York City declares February 15th Black Girl Magic Day.
But first, the latest headlines. After pauses for COVID and Hollywood strikes, movie and TV production has resumed on the streets of New York City. In the weeks since the strikes ended, the number of permits issued by the city for projects being filmed on public property have quickly rebounded. But fire department chiefs in New York City are finding themselves in deep waters. New York investigators working with federal authorities also searched the chief's offices at the department's headquarters as part of an inquiry into whether they inappropriately accepted payments. Greece is set to be the first Orthodox country to allow same-sex marriage. The country's parliament is expected to also extend equal parental rights to same-sex couples, including clearing the way for adopting children. And later tonight, a University of Iowa senior is set to break the women's scoring record at the National Collegiate Basketball Tournament. Caitlin Clark of the Iowa Hawkeyes says she's excited and not anxious as she approaches the big game. She's on track for a slam dunk, with an average of 32 points per game this season.
For Columbia Radio News, I'm Maureen Saint. In the Middle East, Israeli special forces enter Gaza's besieged Nasser hospital. The hospital and its surrounding areas were once designated as a safe zone by the IDF. Videos verified by the BBC show hospital patients, some on stretchers and still in their hospital beds, and staff evacuating under fire. Nasser Hospital is located in the south of the Gaza Strip, where over 1 million civilians have fled since the start of Israel's war on Hamas following the attacks on October 7th. Russia advances on a new satellite-killing weapon designed to attack America and its allies. The House Intelligence Committee announced that it is not considered an urgent threat, but called on the Biden administration to declassify further information. The Kansas City Police arrested 3 people in connection with the Super Bowl parade shooting. Kansas City Police Chief Stacey Graves announced today that the gunfire was a result of a personal dispute. Graves said those in custody include 2 juveniles.
This is still under investigation. We do have 24 hours until we have to either file charges or release them.
Yesterday's Kansas City Chiefs victory parade ended in a deadly shooting with over 20 casualties and 1 death. Local police confirmed that half of these casualties were children under 16. The site of the tragedy, Union Station, may reopen as early as tomorrow as the investigation continues. Mayor Quinton Lucas said in today's press conference that it would not be the end of parades in Kansas City. And a new report from the Justice Department finds nearly a decade of failures resulted in high suicide rates behind bars. The Federal Bureau of Prisons could have prevented suicides of nearly 200 inmates, the report finds. Chronic staffing challenges and unsafe conditions led to many of these deaths. Hundreds of thousands of migrant children arriving alone in the US have been vulnerable to exploitation. A new report released today found failures to protect these children. The Department of Health and Human Services failed to vet adult sponsors before placing children in their care. The department's Inspector General revealed the department's failure to conduct safety checks on the children once they were released. As a result, migrant children have ended up working in dangerous jobs across the country, violating child labour laws. And outer space is set to get even busier.
3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff. Go SpaceX, go IM-1 and the Odysseus lunar lander.
The lunar lander Odysseus launched into the atmosphere early this morning. If all goes well, Odysseus will make history as the first American spacecraft to land on the moon in 50 years. The mission's leaders are confident that it will be the first successful private attempt to reach the surface of the moon unscathed. This is Maureen Saint, Columbia Radio News.
Theater performers are increasingly making a transition from the Broadway stage to digital screens. Mark Weitz is the executive director and founder of the NYC Indie Theater Film Festival. It opens tonight, and it highlights theater artists branching out into digital media. I asked him about the challenges and opportunities stage actors are facing in new media.
Now, I always had the assumption that theater was more grassroots and easier to produce, whereas film was this thing that you needed an expensive budget, a big team in order to make. But this festival is really about people making the transition from theater to film. Do you think film is becoming more accessible than theater? Do you think it's always been that way?
Space has gotten really expensive. Renting a theater has gotten incredibly expensive. And the amount of rehearsal you need for a play means that, it's going to take you 8 weeks, 10 weeks minimum. And then you have to have the script in the first place. Whereas with film, I just think, nowadays, we've all seen the ads where somebody puts together this amazing film on an iPhone. And also, you can edit your own films. So now it can really become a labor of love. Again, not that a lot of these films, I would say, are edited in our festival by the director, but the technology is there. You can play, you can gain experience, you can play around, you can put together a high quality film. It does seem to have flipped.
So COVID-19 really changed theater in New York. I remember there was all this talk, is Broadway dying? Will Broadway come back? Do you think COVID-19 has played a role in that transition of film becoming more accessible than live theater?
COVID-19 made everybody scared to be in a room together. And it's really hard to do theater if you don't want to be in a room together. Although there were some wonderful examples of digital theater. And actually, I think the best example of it, the one I can remember, the biggest, is Russian Troll Farm, which is currently right now at the Vineyard. And it was supposed to be a play, but they hurriedly made it a digital adaptation. But it really captured everybody's imagination. People were like, this is amazing. What a crazy blend of theater and digital. We're in person only this year, and I'm really excited to get people back into a room together. I think even watching a film, it benefits when you're all in a room together, laughing at the same moment or crying at the same moment and being part of that community.
This was a very big and kind of chaotic year for the film and theater industries. I know there's been union strikes this year.
When we started this festival, everybody was making a web series. This was what I like to call it. It was really the end of the golden era of this idealism that we could just watch all these independent TV shows made by people, and and these big production companies were buying up these independent TV shows and just promoting them. So I think the end result back then was, I'm going to make a web series and someone's going to buy this from me. Now you might say, well, I'm going to make an indie film and someone's going to buy this from me. But, that system is in trouble too. Sundance just happened a month ago and they're talking about how the industry is broken and stuff. So we're affected by it because the larger economics of it are challenging and continuing to change, and they seem like they're getting worse. But I would not say we were specifically impacted by the strikes themselves.
Was Mark Weitz, executive director and founder of the NYC Indie Theater Film Festival. It starts tonight at Art New York Theaters.
Today is the first ever official Black Girl Magic Day in New York City. The event was created to celebrate and empower Black women. Cecilia Blotto reports.
The city's first ever Black Girl Magic ceremony will take place at City Hall tonight. But this morning, most Black women at City Hall are rushing to meetings. Mercedes Narcisse is a city council member representing District 46 in Brooklyn. She gets it.
I am a Black Girl Magic. It's just
You are.
giving hope to all the Black girls around the world. Whatever your dream may be, just shoot for it. Shoot for the stars.
Black Girl Magic is also about heroes, or sheroes. Narcisse says one of the Black women she most admires is Adrienne Adams, the first ever African-American speaker of the city council. Adrienne Adams, no relation to the mayor, was elected 2 years ago and leads the first women-majority city council in New York history.
It should have happened before, but I am so appreciative to serve under that leadership, to be at the right time, at the right place, and to do the best we can for New York City.
This month last year, Council member Althea Stevens passed the resolution officially recognizing Black Girl Magic Day. Samantha Vincent is a social worker. She's at City Hall for a meeting about volunteerism in the city. She struggled to pick just one Black woman she admires. There are just two.
Many. To name a few, my mom, she's an educator for DOE. Mary Brooks, she's a wonderful dancer and had a dance company in Brooklyn.
Vincent says she wants more Black women at every level.
I hate to be the one around the table, and a lot of times that is my position, where I'm one of only. And for me, that is heartbreaking to be the only one in that room.
Judy Dent's work is to bring more Black girl magic to every room. Her women's empowerment group pairs successful professionals of color to mentor younger women. Her shout out today goes to Vice President Kamala Harris and the city's Attorney General, Letitia James.
Because they're powerful women, but they also care about the community. They give back, they come into the community and talk to the residents to see what they need. I could go on and on and on.
Kamala Harris and Letitia James are showing other Black women a way to lead. Council member Mercedes Narcisse says her whole mission is to get more Black female leaders.
That's all I do, pushing for Black agenda. As an entrepreneur myself, opening several businesses in New York City, we know that we don't get the support.
But at least for tonight, Black Girl Magic will be celebrated at City Hall with 3 live performances and an awards ceremony. Cecilia Blotto, Columbia Radio News.
Democrats gained a seat in the narrowly divided House of Representatives this week. In a special election on Tuesday, voters in New York's 3rd Congressional District elected a familiar face, Tom Suozzi, to replace disgraced Congressman George Santos. Dean Condaleo reports.
Tom Suozzi was technically running against Nassau County legislator Mazi Pilip, but in many ways he was running against George Santos. Santos, who was kicked out of the House of Representatives in December, lied about his education, career, ties to the Holocaust, 9/11 attacks, and even his animal charity. He's now facing charges of campaign finance fraud. So for this special election to replace Santos, voters were excited.
Let's hear it for the young Dems!
Tom Suozzi is back.
Wait, does anybody else want to tell me what group is here by chanting their group?
Suozzi held this seat in Congress for 6 years before Santos and left office to run for governor. Ming Chang lives in Woodbury, and he's happy to vote for a familiar and non-lying face.
I fed up what happened with Joe Santos and decided that they go, do something about it and come out and they elect Tom.
In his campaign, Suozzi was playing his greatest hits to appeal to voters in a wealthy district that used to be solidly blue, but recently has been leaning red.
We take our unions for granted here in New York because we've got so many and we're so big and so powerful and doing so well. But in the rest of the country, they actually hate labor. They hate unions. They'll do everything they can to stop them. How can you live the American dream without a decent wage and benefit?
John Burroughs is a Democratic operative from Fresno, California. He came all the way out to Bayside, Queens to canvass for Suozzi. He says what the party needs is
somebody who's going to be honest, I think, is the most underlying issue, especially with this election. But just a Democrat with good values.
Burroughs is here in part because the margin in the House is so razor thin.
We need to start a little bit more of an equilibrium in Congress, right? Where right now Republicans they have power because they have a 4-person majority right now, effectively. And what we need to do is we need to create a little bit more balance.
Suozzi can't get too comfortable. He will have to run for this seat again in November. And with a high-stakes presidential election, these types of suburban swing districts are going to be closely watched. Dean Condaleo, Columbia Radio News. Today is not only Black Girl Magic Day, it is also Singles Awareness Day. For those who don't wish to remain single, there are a lot of ways to meet new partners, including, of course, with dating apps. But some young singles are now trying a time-tested option, speed dating. As Samuel Eli Shepard reports, speed dating has evolved to meet this generation's needs.
At the 235th Rooftop Bar in Midtown, singles are sipping martinis on luxurious lounge chairs. Chocolates are scattered all over the tables. It's the weekend before Valentine's Day. There's a lot of chit-chat.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Williams. I'm 28 years old. I live in New York City right now. You take this piece of paper and you write down all their names.
Participants get 3 minutes to introduce themselves to a new partner. And then a bell rings. On to the next. Like Williams, a lot of these daters are members of Gen Z, roughly defined as people born after 1996. And they're turning to speed dating after becoming disappointed with dating apps.
I don't really like the idea of them, and I feel like people are almost kind of devalued on apps like that where you have so much choice.
Tonight's event is led by Ellie Galarza. She helps run NY Minute Dating, Galarza is really busy, so I caught up with her later on Zoom. Speed dating worked for her. That's how she met her husband and the co-owner of the company. Now she's trying to sell the idea to Gen Z, and she says it's tough.
I feel like this younger generation are a little bit more cautious of meeting in person compared to answering in a text or you answering online.
According to a 2022 report by the meditation app Calm, 58% of Gen Zers said they felt anxious most of or all the time, 10% more than millennials.
It's not a flaw of the generation.
Andrew Roth should know. He's 25. He founded a company to help brands reach Gen Z.
Other generations were born in the same environmental pressures and access to media that we've had, they would be facing the same anxiety. Gen Zers are really fearful of what the outcomes will be in a world where so much certainty is built into every swipe, but so much uncertainty is built into the real world. And so
NY Minute Dating's Ellie Galarza is seeing how option overload has impacted how Gen Z does speed dating.
For the younger ones, they kind of know within like 30 seconds, like within a minute, as soon as they sit down, yes or no. So for the younger one, we try to do something that it's faster.
And Gen Z's dating habits have affected how the Galarzas do outreach.
No, we had to adapt. I believe if we didn't adapt, we would have been out of the event industry. And even now, there's still people that are not open or comfortable to going out and meeting in person. So we have certain events that we still do online.
The company uses Instagram and Facebook, but they still struggle to market to Gen Z. But back at the speed dating event, the Gen Zers who made it through the door said they were having a great time, like Haley.
I love looking at people in the eyes and actually forming a connection, as opposed to getting a nasty DM on Tinder.
Maybe there's no screen to hide behind. But for some Gen Zers, if they're willing to take a leap, in person, speed dating can be a perfect match. Samuel Eli Shepherd, Columbia Radio News. Filmed on public property has quickly rebounded.
But fire department chiefs in New York City are finding themselves in deep water. New York investigators working with federal authorities also searched the chief's offices at the department's headquarters as part of an inquiry into whether they inappropriately accepted payments.
New York City has 3 Chinatowns, but not one has a traditional red Chinese archway. That's about to change. As the city celebrates Lunar New Year, an almost $60 million renovation will bring the first of these iconic arches to the city. Maureen Saint joined the festivities.
Hundreds of people crowd around the edges of Sarah D. Roosevelt Park in Lower Manhattan. A red dragon moves through the audience, and there's firecrackers everywhere.
3, 2, 1, Happy New Year! Happy Lunar New Year!
It's a chaotic and joyful start to the Lunar New Year celebrations. On a stage, Assemblymember Grace Lee is taking a victory lap for making Lunar New Year a statewide holiday.
This is a symbol to unite all Asian Americans that we are New Yorkers, we are Americans, and we belong here.
That question of belonging has long been on Wellington Chen's mind. He's the executive director of the city's Chinatown Partnership, and his office is just 8 blocks away from the drums and cheers. It's so quiet.
Why should you visit? Look how quiet this is. This is a runway after the plane have taken off.
All joking aside, Chen quickly gets down to business. He's showing me a poster of iconic red archways from Chinatowns around the world.
There's a huge one, not here, Yokohama, Japan, right? And so you can see all kinds of different shapes and forms.
But there are 2 archways missing, Brooklyn and Manhattan. The wait may soon be over, thanks to $2.5 million earmarked as part of a larger budget to renovate a downtown Manhattan park. Chen says the renovation of Kim Lau Square is urgently needed and a great gift.
Being the Lunar New Year is to give thanks, and one of the tradition is to hang out red envelopes with cash in it, usually $2, but this is a $56 million red envelope, so we couldn't be more delighted.
Kim Lau Square is in the Lower East Side, at the intersection of East Broadway, Bowery and Park Row. It's about a block south of the Manhattan Bridge and at the eastern edge of Chinatown.
One way to look at it is that it could be a collision point. If 7 streets come together, 8 streets come together, boom.
Kim Lau Square is home to a memorial to Chinese soldiers who fought in World War II. It's in bad shape.
But it should be a conversation place. It should be a celebration place.
Even with the new funds, construction of the archway won't begin until 2027. Chen says it's worth the wait if it means they can bring a historic symbol to the community.
When you have arrived, usually what do you enter? A gate. You enter a door. So if this is a village, it's natural to have a doorway.
A doorway that in a few years' time could welcome future Lunar New Year celebrations. Maureen Saint, Columbia Radio News.
Here are more sounds of the city collected by our reporters across the 5 boroughs.
Karim Ibrahim, smoothie maker on the Upper West Side.
One day, a group of Italian tourists, they celebrate them birthday of one of them, and then they got juice. They come to buy juice from me. I speak a little Italian, and I know how I sing some Italian song. Perché sono fiero, sono l'italiano, pam pam, l'italiano vero.
You are listening to Uptown Radio, Thursdays at 4.
Paparam.
Former President Donald Trump was in court today, and he will be back, sooner than he wants. His trial date is set for March 25th. As we know, Trump was charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records. He's been accused of funneling hush money to Stormy Daniels to silence her allegations of sexual misconduct during his 2016 presidential campaign. Uptown Radio's Desiree Nickfarjam was there. Hi, Desiree.
Hi, Sam.
Trump's counsel has been trying to push back this trial date. There are concerns it could interfere with Trump's chances in the upcoming election. And if he were to be elected, there are even questions about whether a guilty decision could prevent him from governing. Now, the date is set for next month. So what was the reaction from Trump and his counsel?
Well, throughout the hearing, Trump remained quiet, which has not always been the case for him in past courtrooms. One of his attorneys, Todd Blanche, however, seemed flustered, exhausting all attempts to change the judge's decisions. Blanche said that Trump's counsel requested to meet with the judge prior to this hearing to discuss why March 25th would not be an ideal date. But Judge Marchand said those concerns had already been brought to his attention prior to today's hearing and that he had taken them into consideration. As part of his deliberations, he also spoke with Judge Tanya Chutkan, who is overseeing Trump's D.C. case.
Now, it's important to note that Trump is facing multiple indictment charges and that a packed schedule has been one of his legal team's arguments for slowing this down.
That's right. He's facing charges in D.C., Florida, Georgia, along with New York case. Blanche, who is on Trump's counsel team for 3 of those cases, said today that it would be unfair to set the trial date for March 25th, as their team would not have enough time to prepare for the trial. He also said the media saturation from these other cases would make it more difficult to find unbiased jurors here in New York, but the judge told Blanche that the former president would not appear in 2 criminal cases at the same time, so jury selection would not be an issue. There was an interesting moment. The judge appeared to try and compromise with Blanche. He asked if postponing the trial by 1 month to April would make a difference. Blanche answered perhaps, but that was not persuasive enough for the judge.
So what's next?
Well, towards the end of today's hearing, there was a lot of arguing back and forth about jury selection and how to choose jurors that would be unbiased. But at this point in the proceedings, it was clear Judge Marchand was ready to end the hearing. But the former president did not seem rattled. As he left the courtroom, he winked at a nearby journalist. Once the trial starts, it's expected to last 6 weeks.
Thank you so much, Desiree.
Mayor Adams is suing social media giants TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. The city alleges that they're exploiting young users' mental health and cost the city over $100 million in treatment each year. Attorney Heather Kukalo teaches at New York Law School, and I wanted to understand the legal strategy behind this lawsuit.
The administration filed this in California, and it is filed on behalf of New York. And in fact, it's against 5 different social media platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and YouTube. And the gist of this is that these social media platforms are encouraging unsafe behavior and endangering our children's mental health. In particular, like by promoting addiction. And there's this interesting relationship that they're making towards like other addictions, such as alcohol or gambling or whatnot. And so the lawsuit is really just alleging that companies intentionally design their platforms in order to purposefully manipulate, addict children and teens to social media. And that's done a number of ways. Harmful algorithms, gambling, making the user feel like appreciated or compelled to respond, getting this like positive feedback. The 3 counts in the lawsuit are
negligence, gross negligence, and public nuisance.
What could be done to stop this youth mental health crisis from continuing, rather than just them having to pay for what it has already done?
So first, I just want to make it clear, like, there's been no legislation enacted on a congressional level, right, that has been able to really regulate or monitor social media platform groups in this light. New York, I think, is inching closer. This bill that's been introduced that's moving to stop addictive feeds, exploitation, Safe Act for kids. They're working towards getting that passed. But we have seen, and most recently, for instance, in Ohio, similar acts being struck down as unconstitutional. And the reasoning, of course, being, First Amendment violations. But what do we do on a broader scale in assisting with mental health and mental health concerns, particularly of our youth? And as much as I think that these are important steps that at least need to be fettered out and need to be taken in terms of legislation and lawsuits, we have to put the resources into our school systems. New York City public schools have long needed better resources, better support. So we're more focused on solving these problems when they happen, but we ignore some of the root causes that we need to begin to address before we begin to see those symptoms.
How long do you predict this case will take?
Oof. We're obviously we're at the very early stages. I definitely think that it's going to take a while to make its way through the courts. There'll be so many motions, counter motions, motions to dismiss, summary judgment, all kinds of back and forth litigation. I think it would be years, potentially. That's, of course, if it withstands some of the earlier attempts to knock it out of the court system.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
That's it for this edition of Uptown Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Our executive producer today was Julia Leo. Leading our staff of reporters was senior producer Tommaso Baragno, joined by assistant producer Christina Makaya and general producer Claire Davenport. And shaping up the edition was senior editor Zoe Yee with the help of assistant editor Pascal Hogue.
Director Fahima Degia coordinated our studio production team. In charge of webcasting and social was Clara Bouters, and working the board was Zoe Yee.
Maureen Saint and Dominic Hall-Thomas delivered our local newscast, and day reporters Cecilia Blotto and Desiree McFarjam brought you the latest on the ground in New York.
Our instructors, Sally Herships, Kerry Donahue, and Priscilla Alabi, advised our staff. And we're your hosts. I'm Dean Condoleo.
And I'm Samuel Eli Shepard. Uptown Radio is live Thursdays at 4, but you can always find us at uptownradio.org. Until next time, and from all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.